Mamiliarka. 3 hours early, that's all it took to unravel the illusion. The housemaid met me at the door, eyes wide, voice trembling. Be quiet, someone's in your bedroom. I froze. I knew that perfume. It wasn't mine. It was my sister's. And when I pushed open that door and saw my husband tangled in sheets with her. That wasn't betrayal. That was war. But what if I told you? That was only the beginning? It was supposed to be an ordinary Thursday. My last meeting had been cancelled, and for once, I decided to leave the office early. The spring air in Austin carried that sticky warmth I used to love, thick with honeysuckle and faint city dust. My car smelled like coffee and paper files, reminders of the life I thought I had built from the ground up. I remember checking the clock on my dashboard, 2:17 p.m. My husband, Astria, wouldn't be home until 6. My sister, Isolde, lived across town. Or at least, that's what I believed. The road shimmered under the Texas sun as I drove down Barton Springs Road, windows half open. For the first time in weeks, I felt light. My team had just closed a deal, the house renovations were almost done, and I had planned to surprise Astria with dinner at that Italian place he loved. It felt like a grown-up kind of happiness, steady, earned, ordinary. As I pulled into our neighborhood, I noticed the front gate slightly ajar. Bryn, our housekeeper, was meticulous, she never left it open. A small knot formed in my stomach, but I brushed it off. Maybe a delivery truck. Maybe she was airing out the living room again. I parked, grabbed my purse, and stepped out. The air was quiet, except for the faint hum of cicadas. When I reached the porch, I saw Bryn standing by the front door. Her skin looked pale, her hands trembling around a dish rag. Bryn? I asked softly. Is everything okay? She swallowed hard, glancing past me toward the driveway, then back to the stairs. Mrs. Archer, she whispered, voice barely holding steady. Please. Be quiet. I frowned. Why? What's going on? Her eyes darted upward. There's someone in your bedroom. For a moment, I thought she was joking. Then I saw the fear in her face. My body moved before my brain could stop it. I kicked off my heels, feeling the cool hardwood under my feet as I climbed the stairs. The air inside felt wrong, too still, too heavy. At the top of the landing, I paused. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The bedroom door was half closed. Through the gap, I caught the sound of a woman's laugh, soft, familiar, slicing straight through me. It was Isolde. I pushed the door open. The light from the window cut across the room, landing on the bed we had chosen together 2 years ago, the one with the carved oak frame and pale sheets. Astria and Isolde were tangled in them. Time didn't slow, it fractured. I saw every detail too clearly, his hand on her shoulder, her hair spilling across my pillow, the way they both froze when they saw me. No screams. No excuses. Just silence, thick and absolute. Astria's mouth opened, but no sound came. Isolde pulled the sheet to her chest, face drained of color. And I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared. They looked rehearsed. That's what hit me hardest. Their stillness wasn't shock, it was expectation. Like they had already played this scene in their heads, waiting for me to walk in and complete the performance. My hand found the doorknob again. I closed it, softly, as if I were the intruder. Outside, the sun was still shining. The backyard looked the same, freshly cut grass, the faint scent of lavender from the garden Isolde had once helped me plant. I walked across the patio, sat on the steps, and stared at the fence line until the shapes blurred. My body was moving, but my mind was nowhere. I didn't drive away right then. I sat in the car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. My reflection in the windshield looked like someone else's face, still, expressionless, not broken yet but close. Hours slipped by. The sky turned amber, then gray. I don't remember deciding to go back inside, only that I suddenly realized I had left my phone and laptop upstairs. I needed them. Work, life, proof that I still existed. The house was quiet when I re-entered, too quiet. I climbed the stairs again, this time with a strange detachment, as if walking through someone else's dream. The door to the bedroom was wide open now, bed stripped bare. They were gone. When I reached for my laptop, the screen flashed a login error. I tried again. Incorrect password. My phone wouldn't unlock either. I checked the Wi-Fi, disconnected. Every account I owned was logged out. My name, my passwords, my digital fingerprints, erased. That's when the chill set in. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had prepared for this. The access codes, the shared bank apps, the home security, all reset. It wasn't impulsive. It was orchestrated. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank wall where our wedding photo had hung. Only a faint square of dust remained. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed late at work to help Astria get ahead, all the weekends I'd spent managing family paperwork for Isolde's business. Every kindness now felt like evidence, proof of how easily I could be replaced. The house creaked as the air conditioning kicked on. I felt like it was breathing without me, choosing sides. Downstairs, the lights flickered on one by one. Through the living room window, I saw my reflection split across the glass, my face fractured by the glow inside. I walked to the driveway, sat behind the wheel again, and watched the house as darkness swallowed it whole. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I whispered to myself, I built that house and now it's turned against me. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. The silence felt like the beginning of something else, something colder, sharper. The night swallowed my voice, but the memories began to speak instead. I didn't sleep that night. The guest room at my friend's house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you, it just amplifies everything you don't want to think about. The hum of the ceiling fan, the ticking of a wall clock, the sound of my own breathing, they all became reminders of what was gone. I lay staring at the ceiling, trying to remember when things had started to feel wrong. It was strange how my mind didn't replay the betrayal itself, not yet. Instead, it wandered back to the beginning, to the day Isolde first introduced me to Astria. She'd been so excited, so insistent. "You'll love him, Em," she'd said, brushing her perfect blonde hair off her shoulder. "He's sharp, ambitious, kind of quiet, like you, but taller and richer." I'd laughed then, thinking it was just her way of teasing. But looking back, there had been something possessive in her tone, something sharp underneath that friendly sparkle. She'd been watching him even as she introduced him to me. At the restaurant that night, she'd done most of the talking. Astria had sat across from us, smiling politely, eyes flicking between us like he couldn't decide who was the real star of the show. When he laughed, it was at her jokes. When he poured wine, it was into her glass first. I'd told myself it was nothing, just family familiarity. But now, lying in the dark, that memory felt like a warning I'd ignored. The guest room light flickered as a car passed by outside, throwing moving shadows across the ceiling. I sat up, restless, and reached for my phone. Still locked out. They had taken everything, even my digital voice. I turned on my laptop, hoping maybe this one device wasn't connected to the same network. It booted up, but when I opened my email, I saw it, every password changed, every account recovered, by another user. The name on the notification? Isolde Archer. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because the cruelty of it felt theatrical, too deliberate to be accidental. That's when another memory slipped in, like a whisper from the past. A year ago. Late evening. I'd come home early from a conference. Astria had been in his office, phone pressed to his ear. I hadn't meant to listen, but my name caught my attention. He'd said, "You think I don't know how this looks? You said no, Isolde. You made your choice." And then her voice, calm and dismissive, "Oh, please. You only married her because I told you to move on. Don't act like you ever loved her." I remember standing there, frozen. I told myself later that I must have misheard, that maybe she'd meant something else. I even laughed about it with him weeks later, pretending it was a silly misunderstanding. But now, replaying that night in my head, I could hear the tone clearly, mocking, self-satisfied. She hadn't just stolen my husband. She had chosen when to let me have him. The clock hit 3 a.m., but I couldn't stop replaying their words. Astria's polite indifference, her condescending giggle. The way they had treated me like a placeholder, a stand-in for something I could never be. I got up, went to the kitchen, and made coffee I didn't need. My hands were shaking as I poured the water. I told myself I needed to focus, think like the woman I was before all this, logical, methodical, grounded. But grief doesn't follow logic. It comes in waves, each one pulling you deeper before you can breathe. I sat at the table and opened my messages. The family group chat was gone. Deleted. I searched again. Then I saw it, a new chat name, Sunday Brunch. When I clicked the preview, I realized it wasn't deleted at all. I'd just been removed. The most recent photo stopped my breath. The entire family gathered at our home earlier that afternoon. My father, my aunt, even Isolde's friends. Astria at the grill. Isolde in a sundress I used to wear. My place at the table replaced by a tall green potted fern. A fern. That was the spot where I used to sit for birthdays, anniversaries, dinners that were supposed to mean something. And now, I had been replaced by decor. Scrolling down, I found a message from my father. Beautiful gathering, everyone. So good to see the family united again. United. The word stung worse than any insult. Underneath it, Isolde had replied with a string of smiling emojis and, next time we'll have to invite fewer people, some seats should stay empty. My hands clenched. The mug tipped slightly, spilling coffee onto the table. That wasn't just carelessness. That was intent. I closed the chat, but the damage had been done. Every small exclusion, every subtle correction, every time Isolde had cut off my sentence or claimed credit for something I'd done, it all came rushing back in one crushing wave. I remembered our mother's funeral, when Isolde had taken over the eulogy at the last minute, saying, "You're too emotional, Em. Let me handle it." And everyone had nodded, because she sounded so calm, so composed. I'd stood there with tears in my eyes, watching her deliver words I'd written. Or the time Astria had told our friends, "Emily's the practical one. Isolde's the visionary." As if that made us opposites instead of equals. It hadn't been one betrayal. It had been a series of quiet cuts, spread over years, so gentle I hadn't noticed the bleeding until I was hollow. I opened an old notebook I always carried, my safe place. Inside were years of thoughts, sketches, and things I never said aloud. I flipped through pages covered in my handwriting until one sentence caught my eye. "I trust them more than I trust myself." The words stared back like a confession I didn't remember making. I sat there, staring at that line, realizing it was the root of everything. I had trusted the wrong people, and doubted the only person who had ever tried to protect me, myself. For the first time that night, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage exactly, it was clarity, the kind that burns cold instead of hot. I tore the page out. The sound was small, but it felt monumental. The paper fell to the floor, curling slightly at the edges. I watched it for a long moment, as if it might whisper something back. Then I whispered to myself instead, voice steady, quiet, "No more." That journal had once been my Bible. Ripping that page was my first act of rebellion. That journal was my Bible. Ripping that page was my first act of rebellion. I didn't sleep after that. The night stretched on like an old wound, reopening each time I closed my eyes. By the time dawn arrived, the air outside Lily's guestroom window was tinted gray-blue, and the world looked washed out, as if it too had lost its color. I made coffee in her quiet kitchen, leaving a note on the counter before slipping out. I needed space, my own air, my own silence. There was a co-working cafe a few blocks from the river, where people typed away their small ambitions, and no one asked questions. I rented a corner desk and opened my laptop, pretending to work. The cursor blinked on an empty document for hours. My hands hovered over the keys, but my mind refused to cooperate. Each time I tried to focus, a flood of memories swept through, the smell of home, the creak of the hallway floorboard outside my old bedroom, my mother's laughter echoing faintly like something preserved in glass. I thought work would numb the pain, but it didn't. It only made the silence louder. The cafe buzzed softly around me, muffled conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, the hum of laptops. I envied how easily everyone else seemed to belong somewhere. For me, belonging had always been conditional. That realization stung. I opened a random folder on my computer, one filled with client archives from years ago, and a picture popped up by accident, a company event, my family attending in support. Isolde stood beside me, perfectly styled as always, and even in a professional setting, the spotlight seemed to bend toward her. She had that way of filling space, of making me look like an afterthought in every frame. I closed the photo quickly, but the damage was done. The ache started to rise again. Then, without warning, another memory came. My mother's memorial service, 2 years ago. The scent of lilies, the soft murmur of condolences, and that velvet box placed at the front with her things, letters, photos, and her pearl necklace. That necklace had always been meant for me. Mom had told me when I was a child, "You'll wear this when you feel like you've finally come home to yourself." But I never took it. I told Dad to keep it until I was ready. Now, sitting in that cafe, I remembered scrolling through Isolde's Instagram days before everything fell apart. She had posted a photo from that family brunch. The caption read, "Grateful for the women who shaped me." There she was, wearing Mom's necklace. It took me a few seconds to register it, the familiar pearl glint, the gold clasp slightly bent from years of wear. The one I had dusted and stored myself. The one my mother's will clearly stated belonged to me. My throat tightened. It wasn't just about jewelry. It was about memory, inheritance, identity. That necklace was supposed to be a bridge between my mother and me. And now, even that had been quietly stolen. I zoomed in on the photo, noticing the smug tilt of Isolde's chin, the soft hand of Astria resting on her shoulder. The caption's warmth was a mask, like everything else she did. I wanted to comment something, anything, but I stopped myself. Words would only feed her narrative, the bitter sister, the jealous one. I closed the laptop and pressed my fingers to my temples. Grateful, she'd said. Grateful for what? For taking everything that wasn't hers? The cafe door chimed, and I flinched instinctively, half expecting to see her walk in. Instead, it was a stranger. Still, my chest remained tight, like every space I entered could suddenly belong to her too. I took a deep breath and decided to step outside. The Texas sun hit hard, but I welcomed the burn. It reminded me I was still real. As I crossed the street, another memory surfaced, one I had buried deep. After Mom died, Dad insisted we go to family therapy. To keep communication healthy, he'd said. Back then, I thought it was a good idea. But in that cold office with its beige walls and overwatered plants, something happened that never left me. The therapist asked Dad to describe each of us in one word. He said, Isolde's a leader. Emily's dependable. I smiled politely at the time, pretending it didn't sting. But then Dad continued, glancing at the floor. Your mother always said Isolde was meant to lead. She had a certain spark. The therapist nodded, jotting it down like it was just another fact. I felt the words pierce somewhere behind my ribs. I had spent years telling myself I misheard him. That maybe grief made him clumsy with words. But today, sitting in the heat, I realized it had always been the truth. Every choice, every silence, every dinner where my opinions were met with polite smiles, all of it traced back to that invisible hierarchy. Isolde was the chosen one. I was the one who made sure the lights stayed on. I walked to the river trail, letting the noise of the water drown out my thoughts. Somewhere nearby, people were jogging, laughing, living their small, uncomplicated lives. I wanted to be angry, but instead I just felt hollow. I pulled my phone out again, scrolled to my mother's old email archives. She used to write drafts of speeches for her charity events, always saving them under the same folder, words I'll never say. One file caught my eye. It was dated a month before she passed. I opened it. The speech began warmly, addressing both of us, her daughters. But as I read, something shifted. Most of the praise centered on Isolde. Her grace, her intuition, her leadership. My name was mentioned once, near the end, Emily keeps the gears turning. That was it. A footnote. I read the line 3 times, the words blurring. Keeps the gears turning. I whispered it aloud, feeling its weight. I wasn't invisible, I was made invisible. I printed the speech from my laptop, just to see it in ink, to touch the words that erased me. The paper felt heavy. I tore it into strips, slow and deliberate, until it was nothing but confetti. Then, buried beneath the scraps, I found an old photo, Mom and me in the garden, sunlight in our hair, both of us laughing. I didn't tear that one. I slipped it into my purse. It was strange how the smallest things, paper, photos, a necklace, could carry entire histories. By late afternoon, my coffee had gone cold. I packed my bag, left the cafe, and walked toward the boutique downtown where I knew Isolde would be. Her PR firm was hosting a charity event, one of those polished affairs full of cameras and curated smiles. I didn't plan to confront her, I just wanted to see her clearly, without the lens of nostalgia or guilt. The boutique glowed with warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Through the window, I saw her standing by a floral backdrop, greeting guests. Cameras flashed. She looked radiant, untouchable. Around her neck shimmered the pearl necklace. I stood outside, blending into the crowd. People passing by smiled at the scene, unaware of what they were witnessing, a thief dressed as a saint. I whispered under my breath, my voice calm, almost tender. "Enjoy it, sis. While you still can." The words weren't a threat. They were a promise to myself. A quiet vow that from now on, I would stop chasing fairness in a family that had none. The event music swelled, laughter echoing from inside. I turned away, heading down the street, the night air wrapping around me like a shield. That was the day I stopped grieving and started watching. That was the day I stopped grieving and started watching. The next morning, I woke with a strange sense of purpose, like something inside me had quietly shifted during the night. I wasn't calm, but I was focused. My mind, usually fogged with emotion, now felt sharp, cold, and frighteningly clear. The first thing I did was dress for work. Not because I had anywhere to go, but because I wanted to see how far the rot had spread. The Archer Media Group, our so-called family company, was the one place that had always felt like mine. I had built it, molded it, poured every sleepless night into it. The creative campaigns, the wellness projects, the app design, all of it bore my fingerprints. By 9 a.m., I was standing in front of the glass building downtown, clutching a tote filled with old notebooks and a thermos of coffee. The receptionist, a young man with a polite smile I didn't recognize, looked up as I approached. "Hi," I said, steady but friendly. "Emily Archer. I forgot my ID, could you buzz me in?" He blinked, scanning his monitor. Sorry, Ms. Archer, you're not on the clearance list." I frowned, forcing a light laugh. "That can't be right. I've worked here since the beginning. Maybe it's a system error?" He checked again, nervously. "It says here your employee profile was archived 2 weeks ago." My stomach dropped. "Archived?" "Yeah." He shifted uncomfortably. "It usually means inactive." "I'm sorry." For a few seconds, I just stood there, staring at the glass doors that refused to open for me. My reflection looked foreign, calm, composed, and entirely out of place. I stepped aside, pulling out my phone to check the company's website. The homepage loaded instantly, shining with the familiar blue and gold logo I had designed myself. But when I scrolled down to the leadership section, something inside me froze. My bio was gone. There was no mention of Emily Archer, co-founder. The entire section had been rewritten. And where my profile once sat, now stood a glossy photo of Isolde, arms crossed confidently, smiling like she had conquered the world. I could barely breathe. Her title read, Chief Vision Officer, Wellness and Empowerment Initiatives. My title. My work. My legacy. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight, my pulse pounding. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I opened my email and began scrolling through old threads. That's when I found it, a press release dated yesterday. Subject line, New Wellness App Revolutionizes Women's Self-Care. I opened it, and my world tilted again. There it was, Serenity Within, the name of the app one had conceptualized, developed, and pitched last year. The one I'd spent months building presentations for. Every word in that email had come from me, the mission statement, the slogan, the color palette, even the copy tone. But the quote beneath the headline stopped me cold. "Empowerment isn't about perfection, it's about presence," said Isolde Archer, visionary behind Serenity Within. My quote. Word for word. I sat on a bench outside the cafe next door, the phone trembling in my hands. The audacity didn't even surprise me anymore, it just hollowed me out. How many times had I given her my drafts, my outlines, my brainchildren, trusting she'd help me polish them for the company? She must have been taking notes all along, weaving my words into her own script. I clicked on the link at the bottom of the email. It opened a glossy magazine article featuring Isolde in a soft-focus portrait, her hands folded gracefully, pearls at her neck. The headline, Isolde Archer, the woman redefining modern wellness. The bile rose in my throat. I closed my phone before I smashed it. Later that afternoon, I called an old colleague, Samir, someone I thought I could trust. He answered after a few rings, his voice careful. "Emily? Wow, it's been a while. How are you?" "Cut the small talk, Samir. What's going on at Archer Media? Why was my name removed?" A pause. I could hear the faint tapping of his keyboard, the awkward sigh. "Look, I don't know all the details, but we were told you were stepping back. Isolde said you needed time to focus on your personal life." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. My personal life? Yeah, he said softly. After everything with Astria, we just assumed. I hung up before he could finish. My personal life. My family had rewritten that too, turning my betrayal into a sabbatical. I thought back to the boardroom meetings over the years, those moments where Astria would interrupt mid-sentence, smiling charmingly while redirecting the conversation. Or the times Isolde would say, "Emily's too emotionally attached to her ideas. I can translate them better for the investors." I had let it slide, thinking it was teamwork. But it wasn't collaboration, it was preparation. By evening, the tension in my chest had turned into something sharper, like wire tightening around my ribs. I opened Instagram out of habit, scrolling past the endless parade of curated lives, until one video stopped me dead. It was Isolde, standing on a stage, microphone in hand, wearing a tailored white suit. The caption read, "Isolde Archer's viral talk on self-worth and authenticity hits 1 million views." I hit play. Her voice filled my headphones, polished and warm. For too long, women have been told to find balance instead of truth. But balance is just silence in disguise. I froze. That was my line. Word for word, from a draft of my keynote proposal for a women's leadership summit 2 years ago. I scrolled through the comments. Thousands of heart emojis, words of praise, people calling her inspiring. But one comment, buried deep, stood out. "This sounds exactly like Emily Archer's writing. Anyone else notice?" A few minutes later, it disappeared. Deleted. I slammed the laptop shut, breathing hard. My world had been hijacked piece by piece, and now my voice itself had been stolen. I spent the rest of the night digging through my old files, presentations, emails, concept notes. Everything had timestamps, drafts, proof of authorship. I gathered them carefully, saving copies to an external drive. For the first time in weeks, my anger felt useful. Focused. It wasn't about proving I was smarter. It was about reclaiming what was mine. I opened my journal, the one with torn pages, and began writing again. It was never about who had the best ideas. It was about who stood under the right light first. They stole my crown, but I still remember how it was made. The act of writing steadied me. I realized something that chilled and empowered me at once. Isolde didn't want my ideas. She wanted my identity. To erase me so completely that even my reflections would belong to her. Around midnight, I opened my messages and typed out a single text. To Isolde, "You know it was mine." A few seconds later, her reply appeared. A laughing emoji. No words. Just that smug, golden face of mockery. I stared at it for a long time, my hand trembling, then set the phone down slowly. The rage that filled me wasn't wild, it was cold, precise, deliberate. That emoji told me everything I needed to know. They thought I would never fight back. I didn't ask for pity, and I didn't need an audience. The next few mornings in my temporary rental passed in a fog of silence. The kind of silence that forces you to hear everything you've tried to ignore, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the old floorboards, the sound of your own pulse when the world finally stops spinning. I woke up early that Friday, made coffee that tasted faintly like burnt toast, and sat by the window with my mother's old box of keepsakes. I hadn't opened it since her memorial. It still smelled faintly of her, lavender and cedar wood. Inside were small things that didn't matter to anyone else but her, a pair of reading glasses, a folded church bulletin, a worn-out journal with a broken spine. At the bottom, wrapped in an old scarf, was her phone. The battery had long died, but I'd kept it anyway. A memory suddenly surfaced, she'd left me a voicemail before she passed. I grabbed my charger, plugged it in, and waited. When the screen flickered to life, I found the message labeled 4M. Her voice filled the room, soft and steady. "Don't let anyone dim your light, Emily. You were born to lead, even if no one ever hands you the crown." I froze. It had been years since I'd heard her voice, and still it carried that calm certainty, that sense she always knew something I didn't. I played the message again, and again, until her words began to seep beneath my skin. Maybe she'd seen this coming. Maybe she'd known how easily kindness could be mistaken for weakness. Her words became a pulse in my chest, steady, rhythmic, a reminder of who I was before they broke me. By mid-morning, I decided to read her journal. Most entries were about the foundation she helped build and her endless to-do lists. But near the back, the handwriting changed, shakier, slower. One page had a faint fold in the corner. When I peeled it open, a small note fell out, tucked into a hidden pocket between the pages. It was written in her favorite blue ink. If they turn their back on you, it's because they fear your light. Never apologize for shining. My throat tightened. I traced the letters with my fingertips, realizing she must have hidden this on purpose. My mother had always believed words could heal, but now her words lit something else inside me, resolve. I sat back, whispering to the empty room, I won't apologize anymore. The decision came slowly but felt right. I needed to stop defending myself and start proving the truth. So I began to rebuild. Quietly. I called a contact from years ago, a cybersecurity consultant named Mia Tran. She was sharp, discreet, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. Mia, I need help, I said. I'm looking for proof, digital proof. I had projects stolen, files altered, and I need to show who really created them. Her voice was calm, businesslike. You still have your original drafts? Yes. Dated, backed up on multiple drives. Good, she said. Then they can't erase you. They can only delay you. We arranged a meeting later that week. I hung up feeling lighter, my first real step toward fighting back. That afternoon, I updated my resume. It felt strange typing my name, Emily Archer, when I knew it had been blacklisted in every circle that mattered to my family. But I sent it out anyway, under a pseudonym, Ella March. Within hours, I received 3 replies. Small contracts. Nothing glamorous, but they were mine. For the first time in months, I felt like I was building something that couldn't be taken. That evening, while sorting through old email threads, I noticed something odd, an image attachment and a message from my cousin Hannah. She'd sent it weeks ago, subject line, family reunion, miss you. The photo showed everyone standing in front of my father's lake house. I was in the center, laughing, my hand on Dad's shoulder. I remembered that day, it was one of the few times I'd felt included. Then I checked Hannah's social media post of the same photo. Something didn't match. In the posted version, I wasn't there. The space where I'd stood had been cropped out, the angle tightened so that the others looked perfectly framed without me. My laughter, my presence, erased with a single click. I stared at the screen for a long time, the message clear as daylight. This wasn't carelessness. It was intention. They were rewriting the story again, this time visually. I texted Hannah, send me the original. Don't delete it. She replied within a minute, of course, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they changed it before posting. I thanked her, but deep down, I did know. It was a pattern. They'd always changed things, trimmed edges, rewritten narratives until my version no longer fit. But this time, I would keep the proof. The next day, I called my father. I hadn't spoken to him since everything blew apart. The line rang twice before he picked up. Emily, he said, his tone polite but distant, like I was a client calling to discuss logistics. Hi, Dad. I tried to keep my voice steady. I just wanted to tell you something. He sighed audibly. If this is about the company. It's not, I cut in. I just want you to know, you may not notice I'm gone now, but you'll remember when I return. A pause. Then, flatly, Emily, you've always been dramatic. Take some time off. Come back when you've calmed down. I'm calm, I said quietly. That's what should scare you. He didn't reply. I ended the call first. It wasn't for him anyway. It was for me, to reclaim the sound of my own conviction. The next morning, I gathered everything. I printed the drafts Mia had verified, dated concepts, old emails with timestamps, screenshots of original files. I placed them neatly into a thick envelope. On top, I added a single photograph, my mother's pearl necklace, resting on my palm. The one that was never meant to leave me. I sealed the envelope and drove downtown, the morning light cutting through the windshield like blades. The city moved as if nothing had changed, people ordering coffee, crossing streets, talking into phones, but for me, everything had shifted. When I reached Isolde's publicist's office, I parked across the street. The building's sleek glass reflected the world like a mirror too clean to touch. I didn't go inside. Instead, I walked up to the reception desk, handed the envelope to the assistant, and said, "This is for Ms. Archer." She nodded, puzzled. "Would you like me to attach a note?" "No," I said simply. "She'll know what it means." As I turned to leave, the assistant called out, "Do you want a receipt?" I smiled faintly. No need. Some things don't require proof, they just need to be seen. Outside, the air was sharp and clear. For the first time in a long time, I felt taller, not because I had won, but because I had finally stopped shrinking. I didn't ask for an apology. I gave her a warning. I didn't ask for an apology. I gave her a warning. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. When I woke, the world looked sharper, like the morning sun had finally decided to take my side. I brewed coffee slowly, the smell filling the quiet apartment. I stood by the counter, watching the steam rise, and realized peace wasn't what I wanted anymore. Peace was the absence of noise, but clarity, that was the real prize. I'd mistaken silence for strength once before. Never again. There's a difference between silence and submission. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. I ate my toast standing up, scrolling through my phone, catching up on a world that kept spinning as if nothing had happened. My sister's face still decorated headlines, her smile polished and her quotes hollow. The future of women's empowerment, one article called her. I almost laughed. It was like watching a stranger wear my reflection. By mid-morning, my inbox pinged. A message from a name I barely remembered, Chloe R., former intern, Archer Media. Subject line, "Thought you should see this." I opened it, expecting something trivial. Instead, my breath caught. It was an internal thread from the company's executive board. The tone was casual, but the contents burned. "We'll need to finalize the report updates before the quarterly review. Emily Archer's name should be removed from all pending equity shares. Use the term silent partner who faded out. It's cleaner." Attached was a spreadsheet labeled Transition Timeline, 2024. The document mapped everything out, month by month, detailing exactly when and how my identity would vanish from the company records. Legal removal dates, IP handovers, updated credit distributions. The timeline began almost a year ago, long before the incident with Astria and Isolde. They had been planning my erasure while I was still sitting in the same meetings with them. I read it twice, then a third time, forcing myself to absorb every detail. The calm inside me wasn't numbness anymore, it was control. It was the sound of fury refining itself into purpose. I forwarded the email to myself, archived it in 3 places, and encrypted a backup copy. They wanted to bury me quietly. Instead, they just handed me a shovel to dig up the truth. By early afternoon, I was sitting in the office of Ruth Salinas, a lawyer recommended by a friend of a friend. She was known for her composure and her ability to dismantle empires with precision, not volume. Her office was modest, bookshelves lined with case files, a faint scent of jasmine tea lingering in the air. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses and said, "Tell me everything, but start with what you can prove." I laid out my evidence, copies of my drafts, timestamps, the deleted company listings, the app documentation. I showed her the forwarded email. Ruth's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "Emily," she said finally, "you're not just fighting for credit. You're fighting for identity. They didn't just take your work, they rewrote your existence." The words hit me harder than I expected. I nodded. "So, where do we start?" "We start by preserving your trail," she said. "Every document, every version, every signature. We timestamp it all. You've been erased on paper, but paper can be rewritten." I spent hours with her, scanning, printing, and notarizing everything. She was efficient, calm, almost surgical in her approach. "The moment we file, they'll know," she warned. "Good," I said. "I want them to." By the time I left her office, the sun was sinking low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and red. The city lights flickered on one by one as if the world was exhaling after holding its breath too long. Back home, I opened my laptop again. My inbox had exploded with junk, company updates, news articles, and automated alerts. Buried among them was an unfamiliar notification from my credit monitoring service. At first, I almost ignored it. Then a line caught my eye: "New business loan activity detected, $280,000, co-signed by Emily Archer." I stared at the screen, heart hammering. That couldn't be right. I hadn't co-signed anything in over a year. I opened the file attached to the alert. There it was, my digital signature on a company loan dated 6 months ago. The funds were issued under Archer Media's name. The borrower listed as Project Revive, Isolde Archer, lead director. My mind reeled. Not only had they stolen my work, they had used my credit to bail out one of Isolde's failed ventures. My name, my record, my liability. The email included a note from the finance department: Emily's credit remains the most stable. Use it for emergency collateral, she won't contest. I laughed. A sound too dry to be humor. I couldn't decide if I wanted to cry or scream, so instead, I did neither. I stood, walked to the sink, and poured myself a glass of water, hands steady as if my body refused to mirror my rage. They thought I wouldn't contest. They thought I'd vanish quietly, as always. I printed the document, placed it in my folder, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. You wanted peace, I told myself softly. She wanted a war. The next morning, I dressed deliberately, navy blazer, hair pulled back, the same understated perfume I used to wear on pitch days. I wanted to look like the woman they'd tried to erase. At 10 a.m., I walked into Archer Media's glass building without invitation. The receptionist didn't try to stop me this time, maybe my expression told her better. I stepped into the elevator and rode up to the 12th floor, where the boardroom sat like a cathedral to arrogance. The doors opened mid-meeting. The room fell silent. Astria looked up first, his expression flickering between irritation and discomfort. Isolde, seated beside him, wore that rehearsed calm, the same one she used for cameras. I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked straight to the center of the room, pulled a folder from my bag, and placed it flat on the glass table. This, I said evenly, is the original loan agreement tied to Project Revive. Notice the signature at the bottom. Isolde's face paled. Emily, this isn't. I cut her off. You took a loan under my name. You used my credit to fund your failure. And then you scrubbed me from every file like I was dead. No one moved. Even the ticking wall clock sounded louder. I looked at Astria next. If I'm nobody, why am I the one paying for everything you broke? He opened his mouth, but I didn't wait for his excuses. I turned, heels clicking against the marble floor, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard someone whisper my name, but it didn't matter. The air outside the boardroom felt cooler, sharper, like stepping out of a storm. My pulse raced, but my stride was steady. I took out my phone and typed a short message to Ruth. Let's file everything. I'm done playing polite. Her reply came within seconds, already ready. Just say the word. I smiled faintly as I stepped into the elevator, watching the doors slide shut on the empire that had stolen everything from me. They used my name to build their empire. I'm going to use the truth to tear it down. They used my name to build their empire. I'm going to use the truth to tear it down. The morning I filed the lawsuit felt like stepping into a ring. Not because I expected a fight, I expected survival. Because for the first time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was demanding recognition. The complaint was submitted in the early hours, Austin Courthouse System timestamp glowing on my laptop screen at 8:03 a.m. I paused for a moment, took a sip of the chai I'd brewed, the steam swirling into the quiet apartment, and realized how strange it was. The place that once felt safe now felt like a holding cell of memories. I closed the laptop and dressed in comfortable yet firm clothes, dark blazer, soft blouse, hair pulled back. I needed to be ready. When we drove to the building later that day, traffic moved slowly and deliberately, as though the city itself had slowed to watch. Ruth Salinas, my lawyer, glanced at me from the passenger seat. They're going to attack you now, she said. Her tone didn't carry alarm, it carried certainty. That's what cornered liars do. I didn't flinch. Let them. I've survived worse. I said it softly, but the words held steel. Inside the courthouse, the air smelled of stale coffee and leather benches. Reporters milling around, cameras ready. Someone whispered into a recorder, Emily Archer, former co-founder. I ignored them. My focus was ahead, the waiting room, the clerk, the umbrella of law. Over the next 2 days, my story became public. I made no comments, declined interview requests, and watched as the narrative swirled. That's when the backlash hit, hard. A glossy article called me unstable and emotionally erratic. One blog posted a headline, jealous sister or jilted partner, and beneath it, comments poured in. Some sympathetic. Many cruel. Hashtags trended for a day, Emily Archer drama sister fight. I knew what that meant. They were trying to blindside me with shame before truth could land. But I kept quiet. Ruth reminded me, stay silent until you're in court. Let them waste their voice before you use yours. Which is exactly what I intended. One morning at the cafe near my lawyer's office, I saw my reflection in the glass, tired eyes, but steady. A reporter passed, asked for a comment. I smiled politely, leaned in, I'm focusing on the facts. That was it. I turned and walked away. My silence wasn't weakness, it was a strategy. Later that afternoon, Bryn Sinclair, our longtime housekeeper, called me. The sound of her voice cracked something deep inside. She rarely called me first. She asked to meet at a small diner by the lake. We sat in a corner booth, the hum of conversation around us like background static. Bryn's hands shook slightly as she slid a small recorder across the table. In her voice, I didn't think I could keep quiet anymore. I held the device, and she pressed play. On the recording, Isolde's voice, she'll never fight back, she doesn't have the guts. The laughter of Astria followed, quiet is easy to handle. She's invisible. Then, we'll just erase Archer from everything. I closed my eyes, chest tight. The words echoed, erase Archer from everything. I wasn't invisible anymore. When the tape ended, Bryn looked at me, tears glistening. I wish I had done this sooner. I nodded, feeling a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. You did, I said softly. That night, I sat at my desk, the recorder next to my laptop. I opened a new page in my journal. My handwriting uneven but legible, I didn't want to be this woman. But they taught me how to be her. I paused, pen hovering. I had always believed power had to wear a calm face. Now I realized power can simply be truth laid bare. Morning light crept through the blinds, and I felt something shift inside me. Not healing yet, but readiness. The fight wasn't over. It was just waking up. Standing on the courthouse steps the next day, I held the recorder in my hand, the same press corps below me, cameras clicking. I looked into the lenses and said, tomorrow, you'll hear my side. And it won't be anonymous. A hush blanketed the courtyard. In that moment, I wasn't just a plaintiff. I was the voice they thought they'd silenced, but couldn't. The court was silent, but the truth was loud enough to shake every wall. I stepped into the courthouse that morning with a quiet determination I hadn't felt in years. My heels clicked against the marble floor, and each tap seemed to echo not just in the hallway but in my memory, every meeting, every smile, every omission that led me here. I arrived early, before the crowd gathered. The security checkpoint processed my identification faster than I expected, maybe because they sensed I was already game on. Outside the courtroom, reporters clustered, cameras perched on tripods, microphones reaching out like fingers. My father sat among the gallery members, eyes flicking toward me but not meeting mine. Astria and Isolde waited at the front, flanked by their legal team. Shirts crisp, smiles rehearsed. They came with lawyers. I came with the truth. I drew a deep breath and walked past the rows of seats, placing a hand on the back of one before settling into my assigned spot. The hum in the air sounded like static, like the world pretending everything was normal. I watched the clock. I watched people. I watched myself, a woman who had been erased, now choosing to be seen. My lawyer Ruth leaned over and whispered, "They'll hit you now. Don't flinch." I nodded. "I won't," I said. "I've come too far to flinch now." When the plaintiff's table was called, I stepped forward and stood where they asked me. Across from me, Isolde glanced over, her eyes calculating. Astria's jaw tightened. I didn't look away. I held their gaze for as long as the judge asked us to stand. Then I sat, heart steady, body calm. The hearing began with formalities, names, titles, and statements. But then came the moment I'd been preparing for, the audio file. Ruth stood, clicked a button, and the voice filled the silence. "She'll never fight back, she doesn't have the guts." Astria's laugh, quiet as easy to handle. Isolde's chuckle, "Let's erase Archer from everything." The room froze. Heads turned. The lawyer for Isolde in the front row paled. My sister's mask cracked. My husband's facade loosened. I didn't smile. I didn't reach for anything. I just let the truth hang in the air while the walls absorbed it. I felt a rush of vindication so clear it filled every part of me. I looked at Ruth. She nodded. The moment had arrived. When my turn came, I walked to the podium. My voice came out steadier than I expected, maybe stronger. For years, I remained silent because I believed loyalty meant keeping my head down. But silence is not the same as submission. I wasn't silent. I was unheard. The crowd leaned in. My father's face registered shock. My mother's memory glowed inside me. This, I said, placing my hand on the desk, is not about a necklace. Or a name on a brand. It's about identity, mine. I held their eyes. I kept your meetings open, your files organized, your clients pleased. You thanked me once. Then you wrote me out. And you told the world it was my choice. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were the kind of tears that feel like clarity, not confusion. The judge jotted notes. The gallery hung still. I felt the room tilt toward me. After I returned to my seat, forensic evidence was presented, the loans signed in my name, the altered contracts, the removed credits. Each document pushed the needle further. When the ruling came, it felt less like a win and more like a release. My name would be reinstated as co-founder and lead designer. Isolde and Astria were ordered to pay restitution. They would bear the cost of their duplicity. As the gavel fell, the room exhaled. I exhaled. I left the podium and stepped into the corridor flooded with flashbulbs. Reporters called my name, and for once I answered. I spoke calmly, justice was done today. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I simply walked forward, head held, arms free. Outside the building, the world had changed. My speech went viral. Comments poured in, she's the voice of every woman who's been overlooked. A New York Times piece titled, Emily Archer and the Art of the Silent Rebuild. I smiled when I saw it, no longer the invisible assistant, but the authentic architect of my own story. That night, I sat in my silent apartment, still in my suit, shoes off, feet propped on the coffee table. I opened my texts to find one from Astria, we should talk. I deleted it. Then I saw another from Isolde, hope you're well. I deleted it too. Then I found the voicemail I'd kept, the last time Astria said, I always believed in you. I long pressed and tapped delete. For the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. Justice was done. But healing, that's something I'd have to do on my own. 1 month has slipped by since the courtroom gavel fell. I wake slowly, later than usual, in my new apartment, a modest space with sunlight pouring through the windows each morning, making dust motes dance like tiny specters of all I've endured. I rise, cocooned in stillness, and wander into the little kitchen to water the plants I set by the window. They lean toward the light, as I once did, striving for growth. The green leaves shimmer with hope, and I feel something in my chest, a tender shift. I glance at my phone while waiting for the water to settle in the pot. There's a new email, a job offer from a women's leadership nonprofit in Austin. They'd heard of my story. They'd seen the news. The subject line, Lead Advisor, Empowerment Programs. My smile comes gently, unhurried. I used to wake that same way, chasing validation. Now I wake with quiet strength. I remember the old mornings, the ones where I felt invisible, a ghost in gatherings where I should have belonged. The difference now is simple, I am present. I am exactly where I choose to be. Later I make the short walk to my therapist's office. On the sidewalk, the air still carries the warmth of Texas spring. I pause at a coffee stand, order a black Americano, and stand in the line. The barista politely asks if I want room for cream. I shake my head and say, just straight, thanks. It's a small decision, mine. Inside the session, I speak softly through habitual pauses. My father once told me, you've always been dramatic, I say. I smile wryly. It wasn't drama. It was me trying to be seen. The therapist nods. It wasn't just betrayal, Emily. It was growing up thinking invisibility was the price of love. I let that settle. I cry, gently, for parts of me I left behind. I reflect on how I still flinch when someone compliments me, because I believed attention was a luxury I didn't deserve. Now I'm learning that recognition is not permission, it's reality. The appointment ends and I step outside into a sky smeared with pink and gray. I stay a moment, breaths deep like waves, and whisper, I'm not invisible anymore. Back at home, I sit down at a small writing desk and pull out an envelope I've kept untouched. Inside is a handwritten letter to my mother. I write slowly, deliberately, I wanted to make you proud, but I forgot to make myself proud too. My pen hovers. I place the letter in a memory box with the pearl necklace she meant for me, now back in my possession. I don't mail it. I leave it there. Because I realize this letter isn't for her, it's for me. I climb to the rooftop later, city lights blooming in the dusk. I lean on the railing and look out at Austin's skyline, its familiar silhouette swelling under twilight. I reflect, my sister hasn't reached out. No apology came. A magazine quoted her this week as taking a sabbatical from the public eye. She said nothing directly to me. I didn't expect either. Sometimes silence says they still believe they're right. And that's their prison. I exhale, letting the phrase echo in the emptiness. I'm no longer waiting for an opening, I'm walking through the one I built. A few evenings after, I step into a large meeting room, prepare for a panel discussion, Female Resilience in Leadership. The audience spans older women with wisdom in their eyes and younger professionals with new fire in theirs. I feel their gazes, curious, hopeful. I breathe in and tell my story, not a tale of revenge, but of reclaiming voice. I speak about the erased names, the stolen projects, the late nights in silence, and then about standing up. I say, I didn't burn bridges. I lit paths. The applause rises like soft thunder. Some women in the crowd close their eyes, tears glinting. I meet those glances and offer no apology for my survival. That night I walk home from the event alone under a broad Texas sky. The air is warm, the scent of magnolia faint. Streetlights glow like friendly sentinels. I watch my shadow stretch long and then recede. They took everything I thought defined me. But when the silence came back, so did I. I open the door to my apartment, drop my purse on the bench, slip off my shoes, and breathe deeply. I carry memories, scars, stories, all stitched into the fabric of who I am now. They may not vanish. But they no longer rule me. Some endings don't close the door. They leave it open for the next woman to walk through. And I step forward, not because I won a war, but because I chose my truth. Sometimes, the deepest wounds don't come from strangers, but from the ones we once trusted the most. This story wasn't just about betrayal, it was about reclaiming voice, rebuilding identity, and choosing self-worth over silence. Have you ever forgiven someone who never apologized? Or found your strength after losing everything? If Emily's story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true life journeys of resilience,